So I've been doing some research for the past 3 days to make everything a little simpler for on the state management side. It is very much a functional programming paradise, but for some of us, we don't really fit in the paradise. Anyway, just saying. I'll have that on recording here for posterity. Anyway, so basically what I worked on was looking at alternative solutions where we can still retain all our performance optimizations, but allow us to move faster and more confidently using paradigms we're already familiar with as software engineers. So that's the point. And what came out of this was a few things that are unexpected. And one of those such things, while looking at a framework that sits on top of Redux, I'll get into that in a sec, but what came out of this was an idea of how can we update state in each of our reducers easily and it makes sense. So I'm going to show sort of a before here. For example, like say we get a list of the templates back from GraphQL. In the end, we have this kind of code to process those lists of templates into the state store, essentially, so we can display them in the GUI. So what we have going on here is we have to create a hash map, and we have to basically then update a list of IDs that point to the objects of the templates, essentially.
It's also not very obvious.
And this is very readable, right? Yeah, yeah. If you knew functional programming, this is easy, right? No, we don't want to go this way. This is not for us. We've tried it this way, and it's ultimately has slowed us down and has basically caused issues for a lot of us that are more into object-oriented driven and then a light sprinkle of functional programming on top. That's kind of the existence of most JavaScript developers today, and for any teammates we might hire in the future. So in the end, we need to move somewhat away from this, but in a gentle way.
What file is this in? Is this a?
This is Dux. This is index. This is index.js for templates. I worked off the templates for my experiments, so everything you're seeing is from the templates module, which is actually a very typical use case of CRUD on the front end. It's just showing templates, reading templates, and creating templates. And yeah, this is pretty enormous. It's 410 lines. Anyway, so it's pretty verbose, lots of scrolling. We'd rather try and keep things a little more concise than this. So what kind of came out of this is you saw the before, and now this is the after. This is a reducer in this new framework. And I'll talk about this framework that sits on top of Redux later, but I think what's most important to talk about is this idea of the data model class that I built. Data model, what it does is it gives us sort of an ORM-like feel for updating state in a transactional way using verbs and noun, verbs that we're used to seeing from the SQL world, as well as a few other things that are very descriptive, like adding metadata and all that sort of thing. So for example, you have, let's go back to this, find template success. Here we go. So yeah, we have two stages here going on, and then we don't know what this is saying, but when we do something with data model, in the end, we get this idea of, hey, I got my data, I gave it a copy of my state, essentially a reference to my state, more importantly. I gave it the name of the entity in which I'm working on, and then I have like, it's like SQL views in a sense. It's like a guest collection. We basically can compute a view or a query set of our state data for templates, and so this is an optional string.
Okay, so we're saying the guest collection might be by search or by product.
Yes, exactly. So by search or by product is like, hey, we're in search mode. We need to have a query set because it has filters on it.
So this is just another key. It's not a whole other object. Okay.
Not necessarily, yes. So basically, when we do that, this is an optional param. You can work on the root query set of templates, essentially. But what we get out at the end of the day is we instantiate this data model. We give it some state. We give it some parameters so it knows where to look and find things and store things. And then we're doing, we have to return a new copy of state. In the end, we have to make immutable copies every time we save the state, which is great because it gives us this idea of transactionalness on the front end. So what we can do is, like, say we get a list of templates back from the API, and we have action. And oh yeah, by the way, I'm not using Lambda at all in this whole file, and I'm accomplishing. I ported over the whole template stacks, and I'll show you that more later. But we're using Lodash now, and what Git does is it gives us a way to access data in a safe way because if any of these didn't exist, it will just return a default array, which is a lot more sane, and it kind of makes sense. Path order wasn't that bad, but this is most familiar to most of us front-end engineers with Lodash. So in the end, I get a payload back, which is data.templates.results. That's right out of the GraphQL query result set. And so I want to do a bulk insert. And so I'm going to take my data model instance. I'm going to do a bulk insert. I have a number of templates, and each of those objects have IDs attached to them, plus all the properties that describe what templates are, like name and category, whatever it may be. And then also I have to add like metadata. Like, for example, I need maybe the params that I searched on, for example, that I passed into my GraphQL query that I'm filtering it by blah, or what is the total count. And so in the end, I can pass these two, and then those are named arguments that are pretty descriptive. And so I can chain these all together. And what this is doing is that at each of these method steps, it creates an immutable copy each time we do different things, essentially. And it only makes a copy of the things that change. And such that we can do multiple operations, and they're very descriptive through an API or MLite. And then when we're done, we just say, hey, get my next state object. And then what I do is I do a spread merge on an existing object. And oh yeah, I have to add is loading Morse false because I don't want to show a loader. So basically, I can work with the manual way of doing state management, as well as also I can use this super helpful assist mode, which is Datamodel. And the great news about this is that this is something I tripped over after I got back from vacay. And I ran it past Sean and gave him the gist, and he was like, oh, this is an interesting idea. So I'm like, I thought so too. I just thought about this and it just came up. And so what we can do with this is, what I'm going to show you next, is that Redux framework that sits on top of Redux. We don't have to. We can use Datamodel without that. We can throw this right in today, essentially, into our existing stuff to do state management transitions immediately, essentially. I want to write more unit tests for this. I kind of prototyped it here and implemented it in the templates to see how it went. But yeah, this can be used today. Like, this is a huge simplification from what we've had, going from this to this.
What lines here does that actually replace? So you're saying
Okay,
lines 115 to lines 119.
Put these side by side, maybe.
Yes, I can actually. Yes, I have Loom, which is the same difference. Hold on. There we go. And we're gonna put. Okay. If I can get the windows to behave themselves. This and that. There we go. Okay, so find template success, find templates finally, which is an artifact of the new thing, but same thing. So this is the difference. So from here to here, which is roughly like 17 lines, versus here
lines
to here.
30
Oh, that's your 17. Okay, and then on the right, that's what you're replacing.
Yes, sir.
So 26 versus 17.
Yeah. Plus, does this make sense to any of you?
No.
Exactly. That makes sense to me because I've kind of waded into it. So does I know Ava has an idea of it too, and so does Lauren Sedusha because I've been dealing with this for a long time now.
What is the con function?
Con is like a conditional, which is the same as this. I just did it in the manual, easily readable way.
Yeah.
So you can basically, this is one-to-one translation essentially, except I bake in all these opinions into bulk insert.
Is conditional part of conda?
Yes, conda is part of Ramba.
Which is part of the major issue with conda. Nothing's named.
Yes.
Program.
Yeah, exactly.
Conditional.
Yeah, so that's the difference. Like also, for example, this is like finding one template in the like say we want to show a detail page, template detail page someday. In the end, this is find a single. You basically run that query essentially. That query results in a finally, and then this is how you process that data into state. And so in the end, you insert a row, which is the template object, and this is we got rid of, there's no enhancers, there's no multipliers of this new implementation whatsoever. It's basically two things affects their users, which I'll
Oh, so this doesn't go through any of that middleware?
None of that middleware BS. Like the middleware that we have is like the request middleware still, which is amazing and it's super fast.
So that still sits on that because we need to be able
it's behind the scenes. It's under the hood. But I made sure that everything works with all those things.
So everything still funnels into the queue that the web workers. Okay, great.
Yeah, that was the major requirement for me in my research. So yeah, I'll show you where the get one template and serialize that in. Find template success. Well, basically we're putting in one thing here. Yeah, that's pretty brief. But this is very descriptive. So it's a little bit longer, but it's explicit versus implicit, I'd say more.
Yeah, actually.
And so in the end, we're inserting a row into our hash mapping situation, which is kind of behind the scenes that the data model takes care of for us.
Is that an insert?
This is the insert. I do have an update function in this Fluent API, and I'll show you some of the functions we have to work with. And then promote to detail is saying, the detail is like, hey, here's a reference to the single object of the template that we want to show in the detail page that we map into the view. And so in the end, we can directly just call this Fluent API, get next state, and we trust that, hey, this is creating new copies of objects as things are changed. So in the end, we can just send that directly back to Redux and trust that everything being done here is beautiful, which is great.
Did we get rid of the secondary hash maps for by search and by?
Okay, so what I ended up doing is baking in the opinion of, hey, if you don't, like, for example, here we don't pass in a guest collection argument in the constructor. And so it will take the root view and it'll create IDs and it'll also create params and meta for the root of the state, as well as also it maintains the template's hash map.
But we don't have to, like, if
you don't have to use guest collection.
If we remove a row because we're seeing something, we don't have to worry about, or we need to update like 3 or 4
It will do for backwards compatibility. I still have that when you pass in a guest collection, but it's smart enough on a delete to go and remove each of those references in any of these. Like, and basically, it'll remove it in the specified guest collection as well as in the root collection.
Oh, but you're still to specify it, right?
You have to
it doesn't
specify
retain like some overarching reference structure where it knows that there's a guest collection attached to it.
You have to basically say that up front when you declare a data model. Yeah, like if you have, like, say you delete a template and it's in 2 guest collections, the thing is with the way this is designed for right now is we only have 1 guest collection there. It won't know about it unless you pass it. You only know about 1 guest collection at a time. So in the end, you might have to instantiate maybe 2 data models, which in the end is, it's like, this is brand new. This is something that I built in the past 2 days.
But also we're usually just using
one guest collection generally. And we're also, once we want to make that transition, all I have to do is update the data model implementation and everything across the board will automatically change because it depends on data model. Because we can do optimizations on the code, we can do fancy indexing and not have the run-of-the-mill developer experience have to know about it.
Would this allow us to spawn out a new data model? Say, for instance, if I want to have, products list inside the model somewhere, but I don't want to modify the products list that's outside of that's certainly an issue in the front end that we've seen in a couple of cases.
So with the new Redux,
it's okay if this doesn't address that.
The thing is that, yes, we still have to use that container pattern to bring things together. But the thing is, data model does not depend on Redux whatsoever. It just basically, we can even make another data utility like data joiner. We could call it, and basically have it where it can marry 2 sources, and you do that in a container. And we can do joins on it and write an API that's similar to a SQLite or ORM-like experience to make it super easy for back-end and front-end to do all this stuff. So these kinds of Fluent APIs, I think, for going forward, will drive the productivity of our team. And I think it'll be a huge change. So this is just the data model part of the research that kind of fell through as I was trying to think about simplification. Here's like a delete example right here, for example, and it updates things. Now, in terms of the actual data model itself, how it's built, roughly, I won't go too gory, but it hopefully is somewhat self-explanatory if you're sort of familiar with ES6 and spread operators and a little bit of Lodash. So basically, this is the data model. We have methods of promote to detail, and then we have the reversal transaction to set detail. Like here's a delete, for example. Basically, I generate a remove action that I can take and wrap, any of these entities, and it will basically spread away. It will basically spread every item that's in that collection essentially, except the one that's being removed. It's covered by this omit thing. So it's source to source. And here's the ID, and that ID comes from here. It's a closure. And basically, it'll take everything in entity name, which is like templates in this case. This is the actual hash map area. It will remove that entity essentially. If we have a guest collection, we would basically go and remove the ID reference essentially. And because it's a list of IDs essentially, and so we remove that as well. If we don't have a guest collection specified, then we just remove it from the root of the collection here. No, the root, it's the root collection is what I would call it. Because we have guest collections and root collection. Root collection is basically the main view, the view that shows everything. The guest collections are like separate instances. It's like a query set, essentially, a pre-computed query set. The thing is, the beauty of this is that this hides some of this complexity and optimization that we have on the front end under the hood so that you don't necessarily have to think about it. And that's the beauty of this. And plus, everything is transactional.
So these types of things, these actions that you show us, the
Insert.
Okay. So these were things, can you go back to the old version? These having to be, so now you're just like data.delete. Did that have to, was that,
what did it
be
look like
more?
Before, let's see what it looked like. We have, I think, remove template success would be that, and then remove template request. Okay. So this is what it looked like before, and now this is what it looks like.
Turn details.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the actual thing that this? So you're deleting the ID.
I'm deleting one of the template objects.
You're passing the ID and then deleting the
It'll
template
find it.
object based on that ID.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Because it's like definitely
And
think
what
about it.
what was the other one doing? This returning state with detail as a blank object.
So it basically resets the detail object, which if you were in a detail view for a template detail view, it will reset that because it's going to, like, say you delete usually from detail view, you get rid of the detail because that's no longer relevant because it's going away. And then this reject is like a map.
We're also all in the return right here. Okay, it's sorry.
Yeah, it's all.
I gotcha.
Yeah,
So
so we do a merge, an immutable merge, and then we basically, this case, we're basically nulling out an ID reference, which is actually not as good as what I did here, where it completely removes everything instead of just setting an ID to null.
Okay.
It's kind of garbage heap. I don't like that. So
the intent is not clear at all.
the intent is not clear.
Yeah.
This is
Well,
explicit.
what it's doing, because it's Rhonda, you gotta it merges together, right? State.templates, templates, and then it takes the action.id and sets that to null, and then that is wrapped in reject, which is going to seek out any property that's got null.
Oh, and remove all those stupid nulls.
Oh,
So
exact does that for you.
It's very
But the
roundabout.
fact that like you've got a room full
You
of
have to know.
engineers
Well, you have
and,
to know
like,
wrong.
takes that long to figure out.
You just have to know wrong, which
Yeah.
I don't know. So reject and merge are out of the box of wrong, right? Like that's
Yes.
that's not custom code.
No, that's
Okay,
right.
so you just have to know the library.
You have to understand the library really well.
Which, there's most of the front end, like we've been kind of suffering through Rhonda for a while, hoping that it's
So nobody
going
likes
to
Rhonda.
click, and it never really did.
No,
Never really
did.
did.
Okay. Well, that's great, man. If everybody agrees, everybody likes to know way back. I do because
it's
delete
easier to
is
read.
much more delete this thing with an ID. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I don't know.
You know what
That's kind of like Rhonda could have called a thing delete as well. Reject doesn't tell me that it deletes things. I mean,
Yeah. There's a reject.
that's
and
not a
look
functional
at,
thing.
it's,
That's a Rhonda thing.
But
Yeah.
reject is saying like return everything, but
Except this,
rejecting.
reject this
So
one.
it's like an accept
Yeah,
action.
there's a lot of cookbooks that people have come up with to rename things with like a bunch of Rhonda functions within that. But Rhonda is like, well, the more that you name things, the more that you don't get to get the finer details of which individual one is. And I see kind of, but yeah.
They're like, we
You
don't like
basically have to use
abstraction.
You have to use a cookbook or a helper's
Work on
link
it, reading
like we've
every
been
function.
doing.
Well, that's what Nitro did with Scala and Scala Z.
Yeah.
No one liked Scala Z, so one of our architects basically wrote an abstraction over Scala Z to make it more readable. And at that point, it's like, what's the point, right?
Yeah,
Then what are you doing?
Yeah.
Well, that's
So,
cool.
yeah.
I'm glad everybody likes the new way better. That's great.
Yeah. So yeah, and then the remove, like say, like here's the update action. We update and then promote the new thing to detail because you update something, it goes back to the detail page for the template. Like you have edit mode and then you have the detail page. In the end, we have to, when we update, we then promote that to the details for when it redirects to the read-only detail page.
Some of these may very well be kind of cookie cutterish as well, so we'll probably put an abstraction on top of this. Like,
Maybe.
hey,
Yeah, what's your resource? Template.
like I have an update on
Yeah.
this resource, this thing.
And to debug this, I can say to debug this is like, hey, I did one of these actions,
Yeah.
and you just do get next state, and then you
Yeah.
console log it, it dumps out the whole object of what
How
the
do
next
you debug
transfer
that?
is. Debug what?
On the right.
On the right.
Oh, this?
Yeah.
Well, you can do that here as well, but you have to, the thing is there's no good stack traces from that.
Oh.
With this, you can kind of do transaction by transaction and see what every transform looks like without actually having to save that and it alter the
See,
state.
that's a big problem with the functional paradigm, because it's all embedded like this, it's not changed.
Yeah.
This is,
You could write it all in one line.
okay, updating create success are roughly the same, which makes sense. So yeah, no, there's some definite overlap with the functionality, but yeah, this is,
In fact, it's just.
the thing is, if you're a backend guy, you don't necessarily know we're doing hash mapping strategies and stuff like that. And so when you're doing things, it's kind of, you don't have to necessarily think about it too much. You can just do it. You can just say update, blah, blah, serialize the state, do a spread, boom, I'm done.
Yeah, but
You don't even have to do this. We only have to do this to switch a flag out, like simple state
Well, again,
changes.
your .get, that comes from Lodash versus path,
Yeah,
which is,
same
again,
deal.
it's kind of just, the intent is clear.
Yeah, you understand sort of, I'm
oh,
actually
I see what
accessing-
it's doing.
Yeah, you basically get an idea. So that is data model. Data model simplifies some of the intents here.
And what's
It's
nice,
debuggable.
we don't have to redo all of this.
No, we can
we might at
sprinkle it
some
back in.
point sprinkle it.
So say Lawrence or Usha or me or Sean or Rana for that matter need to update this, and it's like, oh crap, I have to figure out Rumbo all over again and stuff. And in the end, it's like, oh, now, hey, I got data model. This has been around and stuff. I'm just going to rip this all out, and I can confidently just replace it with something like this. Make any changes I have to do. Like, say something doesn't exist in data model that you need to do some operation. All that this does is just give you an object, and then you can go and do more transforms manually on that object if you so chose.
But it's fine. Yeah, so you just write a new function and drop it in where you want it to occur.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Incremental
Yeah.
migration.
That's fine.
So we don't have to touch literally everything and break
No,
everything.
we're not going to do that, ever.
So what's nice
Yeah.
about this, you know what you have here? You have a crosswalk or a Rosetta Stone here.
Yes.
You probably should keep both of these
I
files.
will.
around.
I will. I'm not saying I understand. You can't say that this is 100% I guarantee this is going to work and stuff because it is new stuff, and I want to write tests for it and document it and open source it. Because in the end, everybody's doing hash mapping for state management. And the thing is, I looked at something called Redux ORM, and Redux ORM is gigantic. It's like 29K for just managing doing things like this. This file is how long? It's like 352 lines versus, and that's not very much in terms of space.
But what I was
Those are
meaning to
compiled
say,
down. Anyway.
keep these two files around so people can look at
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
what,
yeah.
yes.
It is Rosetta
Even
Stone,
this
yeah.
file, like we make a confidence page, like, hey,
Sure.
so you're
One to one.
working in Rhonda.
You hate your life.
Here's the comparison, so you
Yeah.
can.
Yes. Okay, so that's data model that can be used today. That can be used in Redux. Fluent APIs today, Fluent APIs tomorrow, Fluent APIs forever. There we go.
We're rediscovering everything. Okay.
Everything's okay, so you get I think that everybody, I think that covers everything. And yeah, you're gonna still do simple stuff here, but yeah, same deal. Okay, now I'm gonna talk about this idea of this new framework that sits on top of Redux. It's basically analogous to Redux, except not functional programming and simpler data models, less places to put things, and we still get the same level of power that we get out of Redux, but in a simpler data model. So like you definitely see things are a little different here, but we're going to go into this. So I'm going to start by showing you all what Rematch is and what it gives us, and also some of the painfulness that I had to do to kind of make sure that our stuff works with it. But it wasn't actually that painful at the end of the day, which is good news. Anyway, so what is Rematch? Rematch is a framework that sits on top of Redux. It gives you your own Redux. What?
Who makes Rematch?
Rematch is an open source project. Let me show you its credentials. Let me go to Rematch. There we go. So it has 4,000 stars. It has definitely decent following and usage. Basically, you have 100% code coverage. It's written in TypeScript. Bundle size is 5K. They just basically hit 1.0. And so they're not going to break after 1.0, at least for that major version, which is good. And then, I'll explain more of the caveats later. So basically, what is Rematch? What does it give us? What makes it a little different? So we install Rematch, for example, and we use their instantiator, which wraps the Redux API, essentially. It uses a model-based approach, where it still gives us reducers and all those CQRS-like architecture patterns, but in a more familiar way. And I call it a model. It's not MVC, I'd say, but it definitely gives a flavor of MVC to a more functional CQRS model. So what you have that's different than Redux is that you have your initial state, you have reducers, and you have effects. There is no action creators, there's no action constants being managed or any of that. What that does is it basically creates a namespace action creator based on the reducer name. And so when you run these, you get state and payload, and basically you call, like for example, you call increment in your dispatch. You pass in a payload, and then when it hits the reducer, it dependency injects in the state and the payload, and then you can merge state and payload together. So it basically bundles 3 separate places that we currently have in Redux into one place.
So
Yeah. So because really at the end of the day,
is this a new library that you're proposing to use?
Yes, a new library that instead of Redux, essentially, that can be incrementally spread into our project and helpfully replace Redux. It would replace Redux going forward.
Eventually.
But with, eventually. It's a happy.
So does that replace the kind of the stuff that you just showed us?
Yeah.
Was that Redux that you were just showing us with the syntax changes?
Yeah. So this is, I ported over the templates just to give us a perspective.
So is this Redux?
This is the Redux on this side here.
So now Rematch replaces all of this. It replaces
This
the
file, yes.
Ramda stuff
It
and
gets rid of
the stuff
Ramda
that you
completely.
just and
You don't
the
see
stuff you
Ramda.
just showed us.
Yes.
Rematch would replace the new stuff too that you just showed us.
No, we wouldn't replace the new stuff at all. It's going to be used together.
So
Data model is a separate Unix like utility that we use with anything.
switching over to Ramda, or I'm sorry, switching over to Rematch is something we could do over time.
Yes.
Right. So
I mean, I like replacing Redux.
Yeah. No,
So I just want to know how much is getting replaced.
Yeah.
No,
Because that looks nice. That Rematch looks pretty nice.
Yes, it looks pretty nice. And
Can I ask a question actually about the? Can you go back to Rematch the docs?
I don't think my opinion is too strong on this. Not super valuable. Very nice, but
yes.
So the section where it talks about the effects, that's basically doing something similar to what like Redux Thunk would do, right? That's a
Yes, it is borrowed from Redux Thunk, but it's also like Sagas in the sense that you can do async await kind of things in there.
Cool. Cool.
The thing is, I'm going to explain the caveats of this, of course, but yes, this gives us the ability to dispatch more, like basically we call increment async as an action in the dispatch. Like say, I'll just show you, it's just easier to show in this case. If I go here, and I go to, bear with me for a sec. Okay, like for here, We have template list container, which is where we inject in our actions essentially to bind state management to the view. Basically, we get dispatch templates, find templates, which is an action. We get all these different actions essentially, and that's basically what they do essentially. We could call, like for example, we have the docs.
It was the thing on top, is that the Redux way?
This is like the old way,
Yeah.
versus the newer way, even though I want to simplify this way. This is definitely a little more complex to find rather than just doing this, because I didn't port over the select here. No, this is the actions. So in the end, the actions are slightly different method signatures than these, but we get a function by which we can.
I see.
Because in the end, it needs to take an object with the ID for remove template instead of straight up park ID.
I kind of see the elegance of the top one.
It is. It is. So there's trade-offs, but also I will find an abstraction that will do the same thing.
I actually think the new one actually, well, just because of having worked with other like Func libraries, like or just the way that React works.
Yeah.
It's, to me, the second one is more readable, just because of the familiarity with the traditional kind of style of React. So
same here, and that's where the school of thought I come from too.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, you can basically say, for example, we have that asynchronous action here. In the end, I can basically take increment async and bind it to an action. Basically, anything that's an effect or reducer is an actionable thing that you can call. So I could do dispatch templates.increment async if I had an effect named increment async. And so it's basically just one binds directly to something that saves changes to the database or state. And effects is just the same thing. It becomes an action that might get more actions or side effects that will eventually spawn an action that will save it to state eventually. So it doesn't, like from the front end perspective, it doesn't matter. In the end, these are increment, async. They're both actions to the front end, and it doesn't care which is where. We only care about it when we declare a model, essentially. So in the end, this is an action that begets more actions or side effects. This is an action that just serializes the state or saves the database, whatever analog you want to use.
Oh.
So they're both actions. It's just how do we want to run those functions on the state management side. That's the only difference between reducers and effects here. It's the same paradigm as Redux. It does the same things that Redux does underneath the hood. And you still get to use all those amazing debug tools and all that sort of thing. And I'm going to demo this.
Judo and Redux?
What was that?
Redux got the same problems because using Rondo whenever it blows up, you can't figure out what the hell's going on.
Yeah, there's definitely things that happen that cause like impossible to read stack traces. This is definitely using more traditional methods. Plus, in the end, we're going to only use Lodash. Lodash has good stack traces. So in the end, yes, we have a lot more debugability with this model. And the thing is, the effects replaces multipliers, enhancers, action creators to an extent. It replaces, basically, we go back to a more similar model to sagas as well. So in the end, we're gaining something that's a lot more readable that covers 3 of those places you would have to do in Redux.
Does this sit on top of the existing layers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Short answer is yes.
Yeah.
I have to go through, the steps, the path here, so that I can bring everybody on board here. So in the end, it's simplistic. This is what this is. And effects covers everything asynchronous, multiplier, enhancer. All that stuff goes away and is condensed into this one abstraction that's readable and explicit. We don't have to worry about what goes where and what gets caught where anymore. And then this talks about the dispatch. We can use dispatch in a traditional way where we dispatch an actionable object. So I can dispatch all the Redux stuff that is legacy. I can still use everything that's in Redux elsewhere in the modules. I can also use this new thing when we use Rematch. I can use this dispatch.count, which is the name of the model, and then the action, which could be, as you can tell here, increment async. This is an effect, and this isn't. This is a reducer action. So in the end, they're both actions at the end of the day to the view, which is great for cognitive load. So in the end, that's kind of how that goes. Yeah, because it doesn't delay. Yeah. Cool. And so when it comes down to view, all it comes in is just props. We're used to doing this. Hey, they are doing a similar thing to what I just showed you and what we did for templates, where they're finding actions and stuff and mapping arcs correctly. And then mapping the state. Like I'm borrowing the Redux selectors right now because they're already pre-made, and the state shape is the same. It has Redux state shape, as well as the Rematch state shape is the same. So in the end, the selectors are still valid. So I'm just borrowing those for right now, and they still use apply spec for that, which is cool. So definitely a happy path. So
How, what kind of time frame? So now, what kind of time frame do you think these shifts will take to like
slowly get rid of
right throughout the entire code base?
In the end, it's as we have to do major touches to a module that we make a gut check time saying, is it worth porting over? And by that time, hopefully we'll have cookbooks on how to port over directly. Plus we have data model. I'd say let's use data model right away. Whenever we have to make a change to reducer, let's use data model right away and add that. And then after that, it'll be more of a simple matter of copy and pasting to the new Rematch way of doing things.
Okay.
And so in the end,
here's my theory. You just showed us 2 changes to come that are going to be brought in incrementally.
Sure.
So in 2 months from now, when we have both 3 things happening because both changes are in flux.
Sure.
And then 7 months from now, there's team changes, and now this thing's in different states, and now there's new people having to figure out what's happening. You get my theory.
I get it, but the thing is, what we currently have is untenable because in the end it's horribly complex. So in the end, it's worth the risk of 2 different paradigms in flight, but can easily coexist with the other and be debugged in the same means as the other. And I'm going to show you how these things coexist in a second. And so yes, this is the risk. This is the trade-off.
And you thought of that.
I have totally thought about it. Absolutely, I have to because it's like in the end we have to make sure this code base we can bring on junior engineers.
Yeah,
which might happen someday too. And so in the end, that's what I've been thinking of is how, in the end, we'd like junior engineers to jump in, maybe not necessarily the existing code, but hey, we need you guys to just take your time, just work on this module while we work on some more critical stuff, and just take your time because you're going to be slow because you're new. And that's fine. I'd rather have them working off of something like this and learning this than having to learn old crap, which in the end, senior engineers can port over safely for them, and then they can jump in. They would have a new data model. That's
not a bad workflow. So like so a senior engineer would take one of you 3. So
yes.
Would take would start the transition.
Yes.
Get them up and kind of with a skeleton of with the change, and then they'll only work in the new.
Only a new paradigm, only for them. And
Okay, cool.
everything will coexist and be debuggable and cross-debuggable and dispatchable actions coexist with each other as well. So yeah, no, I've definitely had to think about all these things. So yeah, keep throwing these questions at me. Maybe I missed something.
I think really what's going to be the key is going to be the kind of that crosswalk between the 2 lands. Like even if you don't have someone that's senior, though, I think that is the right approach. That you could still kind of make heads or tails.
Open up the quick start, and this is how you replace these things from here.
Exactly, and it's also good.
Yeah, good doc. Good doc would be helpful. As usual, I'm terrible at writing good docs. I'm just saying, they're always helpful.
I can write that.
I love docs.
I love it when people who are good at it write them.
Absolutely. So
I try.
So ultimately, and now I'm going to show you more specifically what went on to make this happen. I think I'm going to switch to this view. So I have currently a local server running, not this one, obviously. This is I pulled the wrong one. So let me go to localhost 3000. Again, let me put up the dev tools and see how the magic is happening. So we're going to do this, this. Okay, so I'm going to pull this over here. This is when we get rid of the whole logging crap, this will go away. All right, this is running on Rematch, by the way, and I'll just do a hard reload, and do this. So you'll see how fast it runs like that. It runs like a top. So it's very fast. So how do we know something's an Redux action versus a Rematch action? In the end, what's the major difference is that this, for example, is a rematch action. It doesn't follow necessarily this constant like thing because in the end, reducers, the reducers and effects are both actions in their names and stuff like that. So they do it for you in a way where they create these types for you and they namespace it by the model name. In the end, I don't, honestly, since we're working in one app, I don't see the point in namespacing Tania granting components as an actionable thing. That's not really a thing. In the end, we'll just be smarter in how we name our modules. If we have something that overlaps, I don't think we're going to have two separate kinds of template things that will cross wires. I don't think that's going to happen. So in the end,
well, actually, maybe if we have like templates for levels and buildings and stuff.
oh yeah, in that case, then we do template levels, can't we?
Yeah.
You know,
Magic strings.
but what I'm showing you here is that you see actions from Redux still happening. You see actions from Rematch happening here.
So you have Rematch already.
Already built in and integrated.
Oh, okay.
And
Are you
ported over
using
for
it in
templates.
some of that stuff that you showed us?
Yes.
Okay.
That's where we started from. Yes.
Okay.
We're gonna bring it all here. So in the end, I'm going to go through sort of the integration thing that I had to do a little bit. So let me pull this up. So in the end, I still, of course, in my experimental branch, I have the doc still, and I had to take a look at this and port things over. And it was definitely tedious because there's so many different places to move things to one or these two paradigms, effects or reducers. And so in the end, it took me a little time to pull everything and rematch that together in a good way. And at the end of the day, we have, like, this is how many lines? This is 411 lines. And the rough equivalent in Rematch is 329 lines. So we save 100 lines.
So this is in Rematch.
This is in Rematch,
Show us
and
the
it's just low dash. Yeah, I'm going to show that. I'm going to go through this.
Is it Rematch that's helping us or Lodash
Rematch is helping us.
for the line count?
Yes, because we have less different abstractions in the model, essentially, to worry about. We have only effects and reducers rather than multipliers, enhancers, action creators, selectors we're going to have to port over. Reducers, I'm trying to think. I think that's all of it. There's a lot more different places things can happen in this chain of events that are not necessarily linear and indicative of the order in which things are processed. So in the end, we have our initial state here. This is our state shape. As you can tell from doing data model stuff, we have a detail object, the entity name, which is templates where the hash map entities are. And then we have guest collections. And technically with data model, you also have IDs here, and you also have grams here and then here, because it's the root collection, you know, which will interface with this. And we're going to move to more of that model because this is a little confusing, having IDs here and IDs there. In the end, we'll just get mad at grams at the end of the day. Anyway, that's just a quick aside. So now we have, I wish code pooling was working. For some reason, code pooling broke in the latest version of VS Code. So what's going on here? I'd say it's simpler to start with effects. Just keep it hover over the column brackets. So. No, yeah, I don't know why. I don't know. I just upgraded. Still working. Maybe I have a bad add-on.
It's your mic thing.
Yeah, it is. Oh, don't do that to me. Don't say that. Anyway, so it's easier to start with like the effects. So in the end, hey, I have to get templates and I have to make an Ajax call. I think that's the easiest place to start. In this case, I'm going to dispatch another action. I'll do an optimistic search. I'll show how that works later. But at the end of the day, I have to make an async call. And the thing is, the way the web worker middleware that David wrote works is that you have to dispatch an action that's caught by middleware in the Redux land. So in the end, what I ended up doing was I wrote utility that helps you make that call. And I think I want to further this idea by doing another Fluent-like API to build an action that runs these queries through the web worker middleware. So in the end, that's why we're still exceptionally blazing fast, is because I'm still using the optimizations David did. We're not losing all the good things David built in the end, which would be horrible. We wouldn't want that because it was a lot of the hard stuff he did exceptionally well. And so in the end, we want to keep that optimization. And so at the end of the day, I created a little helper, find templates Ajax, do.make, and make is to make a request and then dispatch that. And so in the end, I'm calling plan, here's the GraphQL query string right here, and then here's the variables, the args, to make that query happen. I hope to simplify this as well. But for right now, that's what I have. And so what is this, and where does this come from? This is new. So if I go over here, I declared all the requests that I'm going to make up at the top. And in the end, this is what we need to make this helper function. So we have the model name in which we need to namespace this action in. And we also need the base type, which is find templates. And then the way the request middleware works is it depends on, it looks for underscore request on any of the action types, and then it will later append on underscore success or underscore error depending on the success or failure of the request. So it's an event-driven model here. And what this does is just it helps declare and simplify these sets of actions and their handlers so that we can easily drop them in to catch them. So in the end, I created make requests and I created all the different AJAX things I'm going to do up front here. And this could work with GraphQL, this work with REST as well. It doesn't matter the way it was built for the web worker stuff. So in the end, I declare these up front, and it gives us hard symbols so that if I misspell something, my linter will find it and it'll tell me, oh, you misspelled this. So in the end, we have no confusion. So that's very helpful to have. And so in the end, when we go back to find templates, I do .make. Now I dispatch that effect essentially, and find templates. How you add that to the view to call that? Here's find templates right here, and it looks like any old action. It just happens to be an effect. So in the end, I bind that to find lists, and that is called in the view. Find list is called in the view, and that sends it off.
Can you go back to find templates real quick?
So find templates, the effect, is that called, oh wait. Okay.
Go back to the model, okay.
Yeah, here's the
Declaration.
definition of find templates.
Exactly.
So find templates, does it call the way the example in Rematch, does this call one of your reducers?
Okay, so what this does is it's an action that calls other actions. It doesn't hit a reducer just yet. I'm going to show you how
So it's
that
an
happens.
effect. It calls other effects.
It calls other effects or other reducers.
But does this one call any reducers, or does it call other effects?
This calls other effects.
Okay.
And I say that with an asterisk because this is hitting Redux landing.
Oh,
So
okay.
not really effect, you kind of wrap it.
Got it.
This is because in the end there's middlewares under the hood with the Redux.
Okay,
middleware
that's
chain.
changed. That's how, because you have to tie into that existing
Yes.
thing.
Exactly. But we don't have
Okay,
to
so
worry about it.
you're not able to do kind of a, it's not as clean with Rematch because you still have to work with the existing.
No, it is as clean as it could be actually. I can make this request generator a
As
lot
clean
more
as it could be in this,
Yeah.
in this
Because
implementation.
it is implementation, yeah. In the end, we still have to do the same amount of legwork really with Redux to make a request anyway. In fact, it's a lot more places you have to update to tie into this middleware, essentially like answers, post-process, the request, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on. In this case, we're doing the same thing we've been doing, it's just we're using a different way of doing it. And so that's sort of how it goes with this. So in the end, find templates will dispatch another action. And the thing is with this find templates AJAX, we have these methods on this object that in the end, hey, I want the identifier for the success condition or the successful action. And that's all pre-done for you. What success equates to is, in this case, it'd be templates / find templates _ success. That's what this translates to. So in the end, I just alias that here with this object. So in the end, we're looking for this action type. So this makes it pretty, it's like an alias. It makes it simpler to understand what's going on. So if we go back to here, find template success. Sorry, we got a success. Oh, wait, we got to add a message for the notification bar to say, hey, we got blah templates. So in the end, this action contains the result of this query. This query comes back. And I can show you that actually right here. This is the find templates, and then here's the success condition. We go to the action. So here's the list of templates. I must have changed something. So in the end, the results come back here as a list. This is directly from the request, essentially. So we get a list of templates back, and we have to process data, templates, results. So that comes back. We got to catch that, find template success here. So that's what we're doing in. Oh yeah, that's what we're doing here. And so what we have to do is decorate that action with some message properties so that another middleware David wrote will display that message. So we dispatch another action, essentially after decorating. We remove the type designation so that it gets generated into a new type, which is find templates finally. But what the message middleware chain does is looks for notify true, and it looks for a message property, and it'll display a message. So in the end, this is like a post-processing thing, but it's just using a fact. We're not using a new abstraction like a multiplier or enhancer to do this. We're doing this using the same paradigm, the same place, and we know where everything is here. We don't have to play, let's go trace the spaghetti.
Yeah.
So, what, I mean, so clearly there's a reason for those other abstractions. Why do we need like multipliers, etc.? What did that buy us versus just having everything be an effect?
So multipliers is basically an effect in the sense that, hey, post login dispatches other action. And so that was what multipliers did. What enhancers did was, hey, catch this action, transform its payload using Rhonda. That's what enhancers did. In this case, we can do both such things using one abstraction in one place. So we're taking two abstractions and putting them down to one. Yeah, because, and we also did sagas in favor of enhancers and multipliers. This is going back to more something familiar to Thunk and sagas, both of which we all liked, except other people. Anyway, so in the end, that's what this is doing. What was that? Yeah.
Really? I like it. I actually like Rhonda a little bit more.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I'm fast.
Yeah, no, it's true. We like productivity.
Yeah.
So yeah, so in the end, what I do is I created like the final resting place to this action pipeline is a finally action that I call, which will hit a reducer action. So in the end, I pass this next action after adding message thing, which will go through the middleware chain again and display the message. And then when it finally pops out, it's going to hit this finally action right here that will take data templates results, bulk insert it into the store, add the metadata on what params were used to get that query set, and the total count of the templates. And then we generate the next state object, serialize it in, and return it. Now we'll serialize it to the store. So by the end of all these things happening, here's what finally gets. You can see that we get the decorated notify true and the message no templates found in this case. And then here's the diff of the state that actually happened. We bulk inserted a bunch of templates, and then we also filed in the IDs for those things to reference these entities. Plus, here's the metadata that shows the parameters used to get this base data set, essentially. So yeah, at the end of the day, here's IDs that map to objects, entities. So there you go. So that's how that chain works, and it's the same with all these other actions. Find templates. Find templates is an effect that begets find templates request, and find templates request begets find template success. And then after it hits another effect, it calls find templates finally, and then it gets serialized into the database through the same. So that's the actionable chain. That's definitely the most complex part of things anyway, and that's always a reality with Redux. Is you have all these actions that happen, which make it consequently easily debuggable using these web tools.
What's your verdict, Lynn?
Well, data model, I think, makes a lot of sense.
Obviously, very silent.
I actually find this much more in line with when you it doesn't matter which one you use. Like if you just learn React Redux and you kind of end up down the path of like learning about funcs and just having side effects and dispatching effects and such. This is much more in line with how you. I mean, this is another abstraction on that concept, but it at least is in line with it. It makes it more. It's easier to reason about once you've learned React and Redux. So I'm a much bigger fan of this than what we had before.
Well,
all right,
because it just fits more in line with the things you learn when you actually learn about this world. It's much more in line with that. So yeah.
The goal of this is junior engineers, backend engineers jump in or modify some pieces of things and get that working. And that was the absolute goal of this. and creating the helpers and tools needed that are familiar to make people feel powerful and empowered to make changes, even if it may not be their specialty. And we need this going forward with all the features we're going to be working on. We want it to be easy for everybody to power through our tasks and make those points not seem so big.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the idea. Everything else is like, just the same flow, same patterns of, effect, reducer, effect, reducer. That's sort of how things go. Plus, I can still do optimistic updates of things. Like, for example, I have an optimistic find templates where we want to do a search, but we want to use what we currently have in our database for our state to filter it before the request lands. And so, Datamodel, I created some Datamodel utils to help do that, where basically you get the search pattern, and then you run this find, and you pass an object that has a name. I want to filter on this name property. Here's my input collection, and here's my output collection. The input collection is the root collection when it's a blank string. And the output collection is going to say the query set results by search. And so then I get next state, and it saves it in there. So I'll show you how that sort of works really briefly, just to show the power of this without having to resort to functional programming. So in the end, I'm going to do Bob Ross template. Make sure this is clear. Yes. All right, here's Bob Ross. It doesn't do partial match right now. I'm just doing a back match. So here's that, and it's calling asynchronous requests and stuff like that. So here's optimistic find templates, and this is the diff on the state. It filters it down by the ID here, and that's what it saves the state in by search. So at the end of the day, what we have is here's the single result in this query set. Here is what should be the params. I need to serialize the search better because it should have Bob Ross template in here. That's okay, we can fix that later. Because this is still, I gotta finish out proving it all. So yeah, but that's the general idea.
So now this is something that, because if you look at the IDs there, right, we've got an object that has a GUID as the key.
A GUID, yes.
Yeah,
the key and a
property
value.
name, and then the property name of that is still the same value.
This ensures that there's no duplicates because we're an object land in a sense, and it just makes sense to allow, if I iterate on values, I'll get an ID. If I iterate on keys, I'll get an ID, and it's also ensured as a set.
But under what circumstances would I ever look at that ID's object and reference something directly by that key? Because if I know the property of, if I know the value of the property name, then I know what value that's already storing. I don't need to reference the ID's object. So instead, the only possible thing that I can ever do with that ID's object is run object.keys over it, which is going to return to me an array of property names, which would be the same as just an array of strings.
Yeah, we could do an array of strings and stuff. Modify data model, and then everything will all be migrated over automatically. The thing is, and I think I just want to just double check in the sense that when we save things, we don't want to duplicate things in memory, obviously. Like, we don't want to duplicate what's already in templates object, and I don't think that's what you're talking about. So, yeah, we can do all these strategies differently. I just built it to be backwards compatible. But yes, going forward, having an array of IDs probably makes more sense, especially as a query set result, and especially also give us order, because objects does not ensure order. So in the end, that's what we want to make sure of is we have a sense of order when we do query sets. So, and I want to make sure search shows up here, obviously. Anyway, actually, I think, well, let's see, search the root params and all of it. So, oh well, I'll figure that out later. So basically, that's you can do powerful things with this data model, even still without, while sacrificing a lot of the functional programming, which is usually associated with power. So yeah, so that's pretty much it, really, that I have to show. You can see that we have all these other things working that are still in Redux land. I can catch actions from Redux land. I can send actions to Redux land. The one thing I had to do to accomplish that was by default, Rematch uses, every action has a payload property. The problem with that is we always use the root properties in an action object. So I had to fork to Atania and modify that piece. I also had to have it where I could receive actions from an external source from Redux land. So I modified how actions are serialized to the model so we could catch those things. Those are the two changes I made. And so that was the one drawback of this procedure. But in the end, we get a lot from it, and we can.
Is there no way to make an adapter for this?
They have a plugin-based architecture, but those opinions are baked into the core, and there's no obvious reason. As I talked with Sean, I've kind of used Sean to help spot check me throughout this. In the end, it's baked into the core, and there is a plugin-based architecture, which is really cool. We can pull in, we're compatible with any plugins the community makes for Rematch, which people have made a lot of plugins for it, and we can use that API, which is actually pretty sweet to augment this. I guess I made some changes recently. But let's see.
Yeah, my concern is more or less keeping it up to date.
Yeah, let me scroll to the actual files not that one. Not that one. Not that one. Okay. These are the actual changes I had to do where r.action enforced you had to have a payload. This is TypeScript, by the way. And so I changed it to any for the time being. And so what I had to do is, this is the diff of the changes I made. In this case, I take anything that the root of the action has and spread and merge it into the next action. I can accept actions from the outside, from Redux land, using this regex. This will I'll keep it short and sweet. And so this handles how effects are handled. And I have to do the same thing here, where the validations didn't apply because I had to receive actions from an external source. These are opinions that are not helpful for our paradigm. And so I tweak those, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, instead of action.payload, I'm passing in the whole action. Instead of action.meta, I'm passing in the whole action.
I actually like that better. Yeah.
Because I think that's very limiting and stupid, and there's no apparent reason why they're doing that. And if I were to bring it up, they're like, "Oh, we just made this decision years ago. We can't change that. They'll break everything." Will it break everything? Well, for them, maybe. But for us, the thing is, you can still see that even with these changes, we can still do a merge conflict, merge from upstream, and it's not horrible. We don't have to make much changes.
How many, is it 3 files, was it?
It's like 3 or 4 files.
Oh, you can go back where you change that from passing in the payload and.
Right.
So on your new one on the right,
Yes.
action type, are those
I can get rid of this.
arguments you're passing into a function? Yeah, I just want
I needed to,
passing in the whole action twice.
yeah, that's on purpose because I did not, because in the end, what's coming out of here is an object, what's coming out of here is an object. And in the end, if it's anything downstream that's looking for an object, well, I'm going to try and make sure it gets what it needs. I know it sounds evil and stuff, but it's the assumption I made in the case that I wanted to kind of put together for a type here.
It's interesting because like I do see why they're actually calling out payload in the meta, because you
Those are 2 separate
so
arguments.
they are separate arguments as well as like, oh, you don't necessarily want to know what its structure
Of that
actually is.
container.
Yeah, like what is the
Why
structure?
do I want
And I'll show you why I'll give you a specific reason why we had to do this. Very specific reason.
Not just because I think they can do this for design there.
Yeah.
Doing all that.
In a sense, if we started from scratch, yeah, we could definitely
Yeah.
just use that, obviously. But here's the problem with that. I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to dispatch an action that has meta. And I want to be able to read the meta. And I want to also add things that middleware will catch in the existing stack because this is on the root of the action.
Well, clearly we can't. We have to change like everything. So
We don't want to do that. So I took the less path of least resistance. And that would happen to be the path of least resistance. So that's yeah, and then some of the, I guess some of this ended up being formatting because VS Code, yes. And also changing
the formatting.
the typing. Yeah, they use tabs instead of spaces in TypeScript, so I had to.
Probably should keep that.
It was, yeah, for this project, I'll have to make sure an editor preferences file is saved so that it can get sucked in by VS Code or any other editor. Anyway, yeah, here's the typing. I guess, yeah, my editor screwed around, so I'll have to go back maybe.
Right, it'll make it way simpler so we can just see this. Like,
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. But this is what I ended up doing, and all the other stuff changes. Sorry about that, guys. Turn this on silent. Okay, so yeah, so that's price we had to pay. for this magic. And the price we got to pay for this magic, but in the end we can call this add a match, and then we just do merges from upstream, and we try and keep this somewhat compatible with
Yeah, match.
we're gonna try and keep this compatible with their plugin architecture, so we can also use their ecosystem, leverage their plugins in their ecosystem. Like what we get here is we get selector plugin to do selectors in this model. We get some loading stuff. We get some persistence stuff for so Redux persist. We get a lot of these things, and we can augment and contribute that.
My idea really, my questions are from a dependency standpoint. Is it big? It's probably not big. You already indicated that. 2, when's the last time it was updated? How frequently does it get updated? Hey, how many downloads are there on NPM?
So Rematch is
Their last commit was like 3 days ago.
here. Let's see. We can do the pulse. So that would be insights. Same thing. 4 days ago, 3 days ago, merge 2 days ago. First lead, contributors.
Okay.
2 main contributors.
Yeah. And they also have a video presentation on describing how this works and why they made it, which is kind of cool. They have definitely been doing stuff in the community, which is cool. Let's see here. Oh yeah, okay, let's go down to now. Yes. A lot of stuff that gets compiled away once I compile it, or once it's compiled on publish, on MD publish. I'd say let's make at simultaneous / add a match or whatever, or just call it simultaneous / rematch, and then we publish it ourselves and we control the process a little bit. But we also, because of the plugin architecture they used here, plugin looks somewhat like this is a selector one. They're using TypeScript. In the end, you get create a plugin, and then you have events like on Bootstrap of the model. You can plug into that and add stuff. Unstored creative, mess with stuff there. This will take time to kind of look through and see what they're actually doing. But they have documentation on how to make plugins as well, which is great because we don't have documentations on how to make plugins for editors. So that's a good thing. Plugins API. Okay. So so there's a lot of extensibility, and plus, because I had to dive into the source, I know how everything works.
So we should have more people that know that.
Exactly, but I'm just saying, because I was able to figure it out in 2 days, I'm sure other people can figure it out in a reasonable amount of time.
Okay, so I definitely think the data model stuff makes a lot of sense. Rematch, I don't care. I mean, it looks like it's closer to the normal Redux paradigm.
Redux will be able to figure it out pretty easily.
And I'd rather map onto what existing brain states exist in the community than to map to completely new ones.
Yeah. So no more action types, action pairs, switch statements, or thoughts. It's like sagas or sometimes those effects.
Yeah. What's everybody else think?
Yeah, let's have some feedback.
It's great. I can't wait to jump in.
Okay.
Some great research, sir.
Yes, fantastic work.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Do we have any comments from Usha? I don't know where Lawrence went.
The great work. Yeah, I just trying to say it's a great work. I liked it, but I have already done the create edit model in the old Redux format. I had to change everything.
Okay, we're not thinking about implementing it right now. It's just I use templates as an example. So I wouldn't. Don't worry that all your work is going to be blown away.
We just need something that works as a base.
As an example, we will, Alex and Tim and team will figure out how we want to do this and when we want to do this. And I'd say right now, data model is probably something.
Yes, just immediately
start using. I need to write some tests for it, so I immediately can write tests for it. So I think you like data model, Lucia?
I like it because it is easy to change anything. Because last time when I changed tried to change the multiple create room query, it was so difficult to make change with the Lambda. I made it with the Lodash.
I was thinking of you when I was writing it, by the way, because I know I helped you with that.
Yes. So this will help with all those cases. and I still need to go through the whole file, how much I need to change or how much I need to understand completely how it works. You have explained it, but I have to still go through the whole file to understand and make changes for my created template if it is required.
Absolutely. So yeah, no, you sprinkle it in where it makes sense and where you can understand what's going on. By the way, this is a work in progress branch on Reddit components, so anybody is welcome to take a look and see what the heck I've been doing the past couple days.
So I think that's really the key point is sprinkle it, not like try to like
change it all at once.
At once.
Because we're perfect developers and we'll never make bugs when we do that. Anyway, let's learn.
It's probably the bad ones.
It's all you guys. So yeah.
So also that we were compared to junior developers there. The back end guys get this.
On the front end, that is.
Yeah, you're half retarded anyway.
Luddites. No, love you all so much.
I'm making fun of myself too.
But Hannah, how did you feel jumping back into the front end?
I mean, just with the stuff from before, like I was the one who integrated the sagas at the very beginning of all this. And I learned a shit ton about middleware, let me tell you.
Oh yeah, so you know what's going on.
So I know what the hell, I could follow all that. So it's very simplified, so I really like it. And I can't wait till we get to the point where we do the rematch part too.
Yeah.
That will eliminate a lot of extra code.
And speed up building features.
I'm with Usha, like when I felt her pain because I've had to like restructure queries that have changed on the back end. And the reason why David was balking so much, Glenn, is because we have to change it a zillion places. It's kind of like
well, I knew that.
I know it's not your fault, but kind of like Chris and our Terraform. We have like in order to make a change to an environment variable.
It's just 3 places and then also in the UI.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, this is another area where it's like, okay, well, let's change it one place and be done with it. And it's not because it's like hard to figure out. It just, oh my God, this is tedious. So that's awesome.
Yeah, this is hopefully going to make a difference. That's what we're doing.
Great. Anything else?
Me and Sean need to spend time on Datamodel together, making it just how we think would probably be the best way to work.
Great tech council, guys.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to call the tech council now because it's 12.
This was an awesome PTO day.
Yeah.
Sorry, Glenn. Your PTO.
Enjoy your day off, Glenn.
Yeah, your day off. Drink lots of wine.
Also, Anna, can you send me the URL for this and I'll add it to Confluence as part of the Tech Council stuff?
Yeah.
For the recording?
I'll also go over this with you about how to do it, do a Hangouts over air with our Atania Engineering YouTube account. And actually, all of y'all are, if y'all want to.
Also, worth noting, VLC can download YouTube videos if you want to.
Oh, shit. Stealing resources. All right, cool.
Not that I've ever done that for.
All right.
I guess you can stop broadcasting.
Oh, I suppose, yeah.
Cool. Well, nice job, Michael, and thanks very much, everybody. And yeah, I assume you guys are going to lunch, so have a good lunch.
Tim, can we catch up real quick before you guys leave?
What?